Hello and welcome to The World in 2020, where we look back at the stories that made headlines during this extraordinary year. I'm Bev O'Connor. Well, 2020 will forever be defined as the year the globe was brought to a standstill by a disease so virulent it claimed more than 1.5 million lives, overwhelmed hospital systems and crippled economies. It began in the Chinese city of Wuhan, where cases of COVID-19 were linked to busy wet markets before spreading like wildfire throughout Asia, Europe and the United States. At the start of the outbreak, officials placed Wuhan into a severe lockdown. Our China correspondent Bill Birtles flew into the city just as authorities began sealing it off.
These passengers are travelling where others would prefer not, desperate to spend time with family on the Lunar New Year. We joined a plane load of travellers into the coronavirus epicentre, Wuhan, a city of 11 million people. But within hours, the situation here had dramatically changed. A government announcement at 2 a.m. abruptly declared anyone who wanted to leave had just 8 hours to get out.
Why should I worry? The virus is already here. I'm not concerned.
I can still leave, but now I've changed my mind. I've decided it's better to stay here with family.
While some people here appear relaxed, most are taking this very seriously. It's rare to see anybody here not wearing a mask, and those able to escape in the nick of time say they feel very lucky.
For some, the snap decision scuttled long-planned holidays.
What can you say? The government's measures are okay. We have to consider the greater good.
Under pressure to avoid a global epidemic, China's government ordered all public transport to stop at 10 a.m. The potential for this virus to spread during the holiday period is mammoth. Mainlanders are expected to make 7 million trips abroad this week and hundreds of millions within the country. They now make 150 million more trips out of China each year than when the SARS virus spread in 2003. For those who manage to leave Wuhan in time, screening and health checks await wherever they go. A city under quarantine with no idea how long it'll be cut off from the world.
Around China, residents post scenes claiming officials are welding the doors of apartment buildings shut so people can't get out.
I'm very concerned about getting this virus. I'm not even 100 metres away from one of the hospitals. It's full. I've seen people entering that hospital. I've seen people getting rolled out on stretchers out of that hospital. It's literally across the road from where I come out of my apartment. Now, that's concerning. My hospitals here are full. We've run out of medical supplies here. There's no PPE or personal protective equipment available anymore, so the doctors have all gone to the bigger hospitals. They're shipping our sick and our, the people that are in bad condition, they're taking them to Wuhan. The Wuhan hospitals are also full now.
Well, Italy quickly overtook China as the country with the most deaths from the pandemic. As infections in Wuhan started to slow, China officials claimed Europe were not doing enough to fight the outbreak. Here's our Europe correspondent, Samantha Hawley.
Rome's deserted landmarks tell only part of the story of this pandemic. Now, with the world's highest official death toll from COVID-19, Italy's called in the army to help truck the bodies away from overflowing mortuaries. In this emergency ward, a video call with relatives helps a man recover from the disease. But doctors are distressed that many of their patients are denied a final farewell with loved ones.
The greatest problem that's emerging now is that patients can't be visited by their relatives, and often they die alone.
Health workers too are falling ill.
At the moment, there are 8 doctors here, but only 2 were from this hospital. Unfortunately, the other 6 tested positive for coronavirus, and they've been replaced with an emergency backup team.
Chinese experts are in Italy to give advice on the draconian measures which are now bearing fruit in the city of Wuhan.
Your lockdown is not strict enough because public transport is still running. People are still moving around. You're still having dinners and parties in hotels, and you're not wearing masks.
Well, Beirut and the people of Lebanon were faced with a national catastrophe after a horrifying explosion killed over 150 people, including 1 Australian. The damage crippled the entire city and devastated a country already paralysed by an economic crisis. And a warning, Middle East correspondent Eric Torczyk's report does contain distressing images.
The blast at the Lebanese capital's port struck with the force of an earthquake. What? People filming a warehouse fire were suddenly knocked off their feet by a massive explosion.
Is that a bomb? Oh my God!
Flashes were seen in the fire, then something much bigger ignited, sending up a mushroom cloud and pushing a blast wave across the city. This priest was in the middle of a service. Windows kilometres away from the site were blown out, balconies collapsed, and on the streets there was chaos. Several thousand people have been injured. A catastrophe for a country already in crisis. They streamed onto the streets, bleeding from glass cuts and worse.
I don't know what happened. I was fishing and I heard there was a fire. I started to head home. I heard something explode and then this happened.
Lebanese officials say the blast was caused by a fire at a warehouse where confiscated chemicals were stored. The Interior Minister said it was ammonium nitrate, used for fertiliser or explosives. Thousands of tonnes had been there since 2014. Hospitals were overwhelmed and issued an urgent call for blood donations. Lebanon's in the middle of a financial and economic meltdown. Its currency's crashed and its people are struggling for their livelihoods amidst a pandemic. For many Lebanese, the country already seemed on the brink of collapse. Now its capital has been devastated.
Well, the name George Floyd this year became synonymous with the parlous state of race relations in the United States. The unarmed black man died at the hands of police, sparking riots in Minneapolis before spreading across the United States and galvanising the Black Lives Matter movement. The unrest eventually reached the capital, from where North America correspondent David Lipson reports.
This is what a curfew looks like in the capital of the world's most powerful nation. Police, the National Guard and the FBI had cordoned off almost every downtown block, using every tool at their disposal. But they couldn't stop hordes of protesters roaming the city. Even before the lockdown, there were clashes and chaos.
Well, clearly authorities are taking much more of a no-tolerance approach tonight, but even before the curfew comes into place, it's clear these protesters don't care.
Then it became apparent why everyone was being moved out with such urgency.
Press, let's go. Come on. Guys, we gotta go.
The area was needed for a presidential photo opportunity. With Bible in hand, Donald Trump posed for the cameras.
Well, it's pretty extraordinary that the President of the United States has been wandering around just behind this barricade and just around the corner, trying to project an image of control. when on this side of the police line there is sheer defiance, even after the curfew has come into play.
Okay, thank you very much.
His backdrop, an historic church visited by every president since 1812, was targeted the night before.
Somebody busted open a door and actually got into the nursery and lit that all up.
As fires burned metres from the White House front gates,
there's definitely a fire here. This is the parish office.
the president was rushed into the bunker for safety. There were stern words for state governors when he woke the next morning.
And the whole world was laughing. You have to dominate. If you don't dominate, you're wasting your time. They're going to run over you. You're going to look like a bunch of jerks.
And later, from the Rose Garden, amid sounds of the chaos outside, a warning he's prepared to stamp down much harder with military might if required.
If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them.
An ominous threat that fell on deaf ears.
Staying in the United States, where the world's richest country somehow became the tragic epicentre of the coronavirus pandemic. By December, there were more than 280,000 deaths from COVID-19, far more than any other country. It struck New York early, overwhelming hospitals and forcing authorities to dig mass graves. Our North America correspondent, Catherine Diss.
Mass graves for an unprecedented crisis. This is America. Hart Island off New York City has housed unclaimed bodies for 150 years. Now it's taking coronavirus victims. The city's morgues are reaching breaking point. At this Brooklyn hospital, body after body wheeled into a temporary morgue, a refrigerated truck.
We lose 2,753 lives on 9/11. We've lost over 7,000 lives to this crisis. That is so shocking and painful and breathtaking.
799 people lost their lives in the state yesterday. New outbreaks are still emerging. Cook County Jail in Chicago is now home to the largest local cluster in the country. The outbreak continues to cripple the economy. Another 6.6 million people lost their jobs last week, taking unemployment claims to almost 17 million since the crisis began. Despite social distancing, people are queuing for unemployment papers right across the country. Food banks are overwhelmed. In Los Angeles, the pouring rain not enough to dampen the crowds. Catherine Diss, ABC News, Washington.
And as the year played out, the pandemic was to define the end of Donald Trump's presidency. The day Trump himself tested positive cemented his defiant approach to managing the crisis.
A show of strength. Donald Trump strides defiantly from the Walter Reed Hospital, where he'd been cared for at the presidential suite. Unassisted and looking stable, he offered his trademark thumbs up as hundreds of supporters wait outside.
How many of your staff are sick?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do you think you might be a super spreader, Mr. President?
Still infected with COVID-19, Donald Trump boards the helicopter that brought him here just 72 hours earlier. Heading home after his medical team insisted he's met or exceeded the criteria to be discharged.
This is classic Donald Trump. At almost every turn of his presidency, he's ignored the experts and broken the rules. Now he's going home with the most serious period for COVID-19 ahead of him. But as usual, he prefers to project strength at all costs, and he's busting to get back to work.
It was a short journey from Maryland. Marine One landed just minutes after takeoff. In a carefully orchestrated appearance, the president went to extraordinary lengths to show the nation the commander-in-chief is back at his post.
As your leader, I had to do that. I knew there's danger to it, but I had to do it. I stood out front, I led, Nobody that's a leader would not do what I did.
The president now plans to remain at the White House, where his doctors insist he'll be surrounded by world-class medical care around the clock. Doctors describe his liver and kidney function as normal, but cite privacy concerns when asked about the state of his lungs. For now, the US leader is intent on showing good health.
2 days ago, I could have left 2 days ago. 2 days ago, I felt great, like better than I have in a long time. I said just recently, better than 20 years ago. Don't let it dominate. Don't let it take over your lives. Don't let that happen.
The virus has killed 210,000 Americans and infected 7.5 million. The White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany and 2 of her deputies are among the latest to test positive. As recently as yesterday, she was talking to reporters without a mask. From the president down, there's a show of invincibility.
And now I'm better, and maybe I'm immune. I don't know.
The world will be watching to see if his battle is truly won.
Meanwhile, a gruelling US election beset by protests, infested with COVID and drawn out by recounts and legal challenges finally came to an end, with Joe Biden comfortably securing victory. People across the country celebrated, including in Philadelphia, the city that tipped the balance for the now US President-elect Joe Biden.
And it is now my great honor to introduce the President-elect of the United States of America, Joe Biden.
After days of inching ahead, a final dash across the finish line and onto the helm of American democracy.
Tonight, we're seeing all over this nation, all cities and all parts of the country, indeed across the world, an outpouring of joy, of hope, renewed faith in tomorrow, bring a better day. And I'm humbled by the trust and confidence you've placed in me.
As people filled the city's streets from east coast to west, Joe Biden's victory was met with a flood of emotion.
It's over! This is one of the happiest days of my life.
A moment that also meant the end of the Trump era.
It's easier to tell your kids character matters. It matters. Telling the truth matters. Being a good person matters.
We did it. We did it, Joe. You're going to be the next president of the United States.
And the election of Kamala Harris as vice president, a pioneering achievement.
While I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last.
But a bitterly contested election has exposed deep divisions.
For all those of you who voted for President Trump, I understand the disappointment tonight. I've lost a couple times myself, but now let's give each other a chance.
Biden's going to change the world, the country, and you know what? This guy, he's already lost.
Even as people celebrated across the country, coronavirus infections in the US are hitting global daily highs.
On Monday, I will name a group of leading scientists and experts to help take the Biden-Harris COVID plan and convert it into an action blueprint that will start on January the 20th.
Joe Biden's victory came on the very day he was elected to the Senate 48 years ago.
The energy here in Joe Biden's home state is electric. The sea of support as far as the eye can see. They've come out to witness their man's climb to the top, a political ascent almost 5 decades in the making.
It's clear for many, a Joe Biden presidency promises a new day for America.
Well, many say 2020 marked the death of China's one country, two systems governance of Hong Kong. After introducing a sweeping national security law, Beijing moved to carry out a political purge. Activists were jailed, many more arrested, and democracy legislators walked out en masse. Here's Bill Birtles.
3 activists, 3 charges, 3 guilty pleas. Joshua Wong, Agnes Chow and Ivan Lam walked into court today as Hong Kong's political chill set in.
Neither prison bars, nor election bans, nor any other arbitrary power will stop us from activism. What we are doing now is to explain the value of freedom to the world.
7 years ago, the trio were making magazine covers as a youthful force for the future. But Hong Kong is very different now.
We will continue to fight for freedom, and now is not the time for us to kowtow to Beijing and to surrender. Thank you.
It's Joshua Wong's 4th stint behind bars. For others, it's a first taste of prison.
I could be in jail for the first time in my life today or in the near future. Of course, I do feel anxious.
Hong Kong's political transformation is rapidly accelerating. Activists jailed, journalists charged, politicians disqualified. Last week, the entire elected opposition resigned when China's government changed the law so it could force out elected representatives it deemed unpatriotic.
The UK was hit hard by coronavirus with more than 60,000 deaths, and even the Prime Minister Boris Johnson spending time in ICU before recovering from the virus in April. But Britain also welcomed in what's been called the beginning of the end of the pandemic with the launch of the world's first mass COVID-19 vaccinations in early December. Here's Nick Dole in London.
Margaret Keenan is still getting used to all the fuss, but the 90-year-old hopes last night's history-making jab will encourage others to roll up their sleeves.
I would say go for it. Go for it because it's free and it's the best thing that's ever happened.
Patient number 2 was named William Shakespeare. To jab or not to jab was barely a question. He was more than willing.
Groundbreaking, I think. Make a difference to our lives from now on, couldn't it?
The elderly are being given priority in this program, which is by invitation only. Kathleen and Colleen wondered whether a visit to hospital might result in a jab, but it wasn't to be. You're 92, so you're right in line.
Yep. Yeah, right in. I'm in line for it, yeah. Yeah. Probably have it for my Christmas box.
Australian Melissa Purcell could be among those next in line. The intensive care nurse caught COVID earlier this year, but she's not sure whether the antibodies will protect her.
Being able to go in there with a vaccine means that, we can be more confident and, my colleagues can go home to their families feeling safer.
As exciting as the vaccine's arrival may be, the government here is worried that people will see it as some sort of a sign that the worst is over. In fact, it'll take several months to vaccinate even the most vulnerable, and winter here has only just begun. But there is time for celebration, if only for a moment. Nick Dole, ABC News, London.
The end of an era came with a midnight knock on the door. 2 Australian journalists, including the ABC's China correspondent Bill Birtles, were rushed out of China amid fears that they faced arbitrary detention. Their departure came after a week-long diplomatic standoff, marking the worst deterioration in Australia-China relations in years. Here's Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts.
After almost 5 decades, the ABC checks out of China. Bill Birtles' lonely departure ending a tense 7-day ordeal. The ABC's China correspondent for 5 years, Birtles is now back in Australia.
It's a relief to be back in a country with genuine rule of law.
His posting time cut short by a late-night visit from Chinese officials.
Midnight on Wednesday, the knock at the door came and there were 6 state security police plus a translator.
Last week, Australia's embassy warned him to get out of China, but before he could get on a plane, police barred him from leaving.
That's when this standoff, this diplomatic game of chess really commenced.
Good morning from Shanghai.
And there were 2 pawns. The Australian Financial Review's China correspondent Michael Smith was also banned from leaving. Both men ended up taking refuge on Australian diplomatic compounds, Birtles in Beijing and Smith in Shanghai, while Australian and Chinese officials wrangled over their future. Chinese police said they wanted to discuss Cheng Lei, an Australian journalist working for Chinese state media who disappeared into detention last month.
The whole episode was about harassment.
Diplomats struck a deal. Both journalists would be able to leave China if they agreed to a token interview.
It felt very political, and I very much felt like
a diplomatic tussle.
Whatever the motive, the relief is obvious.
It's so good to be home, so happy. I can't say any more at the moment.
And the consequences clear. For the first time in decades, no major Australian media outlet has a journalist left in China. Trust between Australia and China is now at bedrock levels, and that mutual suspicion isn't limited to officials and politicians. China craves understanding for its political system and for its achievements, but gaining that appreciation just became much harder for Australians.
Back in January, Prince Harry and his wife Meghan shocked the royal family with plans to step back from official duties. While expressing regret at their decision, Buckingham Palace worked quickly to accommodate their request, and the couple are now mostly based in California. Here's Samantha Hawley.
They're doing it their way. It was all smiles just days ago in London, but the strains have been there for months.
It's not enough to just survive something, right? Like, that's not the point of life. You've got to thrive, you've got to feel happy.
Now the couple is determined to walk a new royal line. In a statement, they said, "We have chosen to carve out a progressive new role within this institution. We intend to step back as senior members of the royal family and work to become financially independent, while continuing to fully support Her Majesty the Queen." They're not leaving, but not staying either. Instead, the couple, married in May 2018, say they'll split their time between the UK and North America. There were claims of racism across social media against the American Duchess, a split between Harry and his brother, Prince William, and the intense media interest in the birth of baby Archie.
I really tried to adopt this British sensibility of a stiff upper lip. I really tried, but I think that what that does internally is probably really damaging.
But the biggest blow was to come. No sooner than the statement had been released, reports emerged that hurt and disappointed royals had not been forewarned of the announcement, and a new way forward had not been agreed on.
And that is your wrap of the year that was 2020. The world does continue throughout the summer weeknights on the ABC News channel. I'm Bev O'Connor. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.